All right, the Malkay Show. Let's see what this biblical guy, chiropractor, has to say about Israel and what's going on there. Current events.
Years ago or 30 something years ago, taught my class. So I always had this knack of just, picking things up really quickly. Everything kind of came easily to me. God's always kind of blessed me to have an understanding of stuff. And so I, grew up, had big clinics. I eventually sold them all off. And because I just, after 9/11, I just kind of came to realize that there's something more going on in this world than just, chasing money all the time. I went through changes. Next thing you know, I started studying gold. And that's where my life changed because when I started studying the patterns of gold, I started to realize that these patterns replay themselves. So when you look at gold patterns on the charts, you'll see these patterns replay themselves. So you can actually predict what gold will do before it does it. I'm like, oh, this is crazy. How does that happen? But then I learned the word was called a cycle. And then when you read Ecclesiastes, it says that which has been will be again. Okay. And so we're going to talk about all these, that which has been will be again because they're time windows. And then so what I end up discovering is, when you take the cycle of Daniel, so this is, Daniel 2 prophecy talks about, Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel and the prophecy, all the different kingdoms that will exist. He also talks about the 70 weeks of Daniel, which, end up being 7 years. And you start taking all these time windows and you realize, wait a second, this is crazy because just to show you a cycle, very simple math, 7 years. So you can't divide that because 3.5 doesn't make sense, right? Well, that's 84 months. Because in the biblical year, it's 30 days is a month. So basically you take that's 84 months. Well, you divide that by 2, that's 42 months. And then you take that, divide that by 2, you got 21 months. And then what I found was that silver and gold cycle on that 21th month cycle based on Daniel. So you can literally nail every single top on gold or silver using that pattern. And then you divide that by 3 and you're back to a 7. So 7 times 3 is 21. So you got a circle. And so what ends up happening was that, I kind of got my notoriety when, gold in the year 2011, when to the
I'm going to have to relook at this and look at the silver patterns. Bull baloney. Wow. Wow.
predicted the day silver topped in at the end of April in 2011, and then also 4 months later, gold topped in the first week of September 2011. And I nailed the exact day to the day months earlier. And I was the only one that did that. People freaked out. How did you do that? And this is the crazy part. It was 1,260 days, a Daniel cycle from the prior top. So it was a simple math calculation. And ever since then, I've used, these Daniel cycles of time, and I've now been laying those on Revelation, on timelines. And those who know my work are like crazy. Like we've used these cycles to predict from when Trump got elected, to watch oil go to negative $38 a barrel to the exact day, to the prediction of the to the event would happen on end of May 2020, and on that exact day, the George Floyd riots broke out. Then I said something's going to happen in September of 2020 on the 18th. On that exact day, Ginsburg died. Then I said 2 years later, watch Roe v. Wade's going to be overturned, and that happened. And so just most recently, I've been on the Nino show, and again, I don't want any glory for this because I'm just simply using Daniel's timeline, doing calculations. This is crazy, but you can do this stuff, right? So it freaks people out that you can calculate it. But basically, why? How can this all happen? And we can go from here, but God wrote the end from the beginning because he gave Daniel the prophecy 2,500 years ago. Every single kingdom has existed, Mel. Every single, from Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, the papacy, everything's existed. Think about a prophetic word. 2,500 years go by and it's perfect. And so just most recently, just in the end of September and the 3rd of October, I'm like on Nino's show, Rodriguez, I'm saying, hey, watch a war break out possibly this weekend on Friday into Saturday. And then Nino's like texting me, homie, like a war broke out just now. So he's freaking out, right? And so the point was, all of these things can be calculated, but it's using scripture and not numerology. It's important to understand. This is not like using some numerology codes out of the Bible. No, it's literally, it says in the Bible, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. The water kept rising for 150 days. So 150 days from oil going to zero was the death of Ginsburg. So you use these math calculations, literally, you just rip them out of the Bible and it says 150 days. Well, then apply that to present day. So that takes me to why USA is important. Because you see, Israel was founded under God, it was God's firstborn, but also God chose Israel. So that's the sister. So it's a brother-sister relationship. It's about covenant. And that's a really critical word because the word covenant is why things are about to change this year into next year in a way that's going to blow people's minds. You see, because Israel had a covenant with God. So no matter what happens, evil's never going to get Israel, ever, because of the covenant. Okay. And you've seen them try to take it for all these generations, but ultimately, Israel still stands today. And then the United States has a covenant also with God. Our founding fathers, God was that creation of the United States. He was there. And that's why they hate, the Constitution, because God knew what these people were going to be doing, right? And what is the number one thing they're trying to take away? Look what happened in Nazi Germany. They want to get the guns away, right? Because that's why actually after what happened in Hawaii, with, in the war was whatever that war was, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank here. And when they attacked Maui Hawaii years ago, right? Japan, that's what the Japan War, they never wanted to come to the United States. Why? Because the amount of guns that United States citizens had, right? They knew they'd never win in the United States. And so the Constitution, basically, we the people were founded under God, and we are the brother to Israel. And that's so important to understand. But right now, the brother to Israel is bought, paid for, and captured. See, this is a problem because what's going on right now, it's a double-edged sword. They're giving them money.
Bought, paid for, and captured. We're giving them money to create this war and tools and stuff. Bad deal.
To cause a war, but yet they're going in, oh, we're going to help Israel, but they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. And that's a problem, right? But this is crystal clear because what's evil's agenda? You have to go back and look. Everything's not political, it's biblical. So you look at the big picture of things. What's the battle for thousands of years to get what? Israel, right? They want Israel, but now with the United States, they can't get Israel because the United States has always been the big brother. But now with a regime of 46 in office, who's a puppet of the puppet masters, right? They can now control the puppet. And now they're talking out of both sides of the mouth. So they're causing confusion to really what's going on in Israel, because ultimately you just know that the goal of evil's agenda is one, and it's to get Israel. That's why, you read about, Armageddon, right? Where does it end up? Israel. It's always back to Israel. And so the cool part is this: when you study scriptures and timelines, you go back and you go like, hey, well, let's look at back, Ecclesiastes, that which has been will be again. And then, you study like there's, that Tower of Babel, right? And the cool part is just before the Tower of Babel was built, what happened?
What?
God showed up. God showed up and destroyed. So Nimrod is building the Tower of Babel. So he's the first Mason. He's building the Tower of Babel just before they're finished building it. This is all history.
Right.
Just God shows up, destroys the tower, and twists everybody's tongue. And that's why they, across the world, you have different relations, different, languages. So people, when they speak, because so they couldn't communicate. Because see, the Tower of Babel is Babylon. They're trying to build a one world system. And through what you're doing, you're basically showing it how they're doing it. They're doing it with the money.
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't for the money, Babylon wouldn't exist. If it wasn't for the money, the problems we have today wouldn't exist. See, It's because of the money. And then this is it. It's the love of the money. See, they love money so much. They know that if they are the creators of the money, what did Rothschild say? Allow me to control the money supply. He wrote this in the 1800s. Allow me to control the money supply, and I care not who makes its laws.
Right.
Hey, what's going on in the world right now?
Yeah, true. Exactly.
What's going on in the world? So you have this complete system across the world that's basically bought and paid for. So, nowadays they call it Mystery Babylon because this is the continuation of the Daniel prophecy of 2,500 years ago. It's incredible, right? But just before Babylon just before the Tower of Babel was completed, God showed up. So they're basically at a point now where they're trying to bring in a one world government. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think you would agree with me, right?
Oh, yeah, I do.
So, they're talking about central bank digital currency. They're in office now with taking 45. Oh, they got 46 in office. He was a puppet. And so they're controlling everything. So they're, this far from bringing in their one world agenda. And that's why we go on the stage. You know, Clay's always talking about the Great Reset versus the Great
Right.
Awakening, because the Great Reset is basically the one world government. So they're trying to bring forth the one world government. They're trying to redo what Nimrod did. And who's Nimrod? This is pretty cool, because if you look at Washington, D.C., you'll notice that all the streets are built on 33-degree angles. Okay. So, you know, underneath, you know, there's all these tunnels, but mainly you can just see it from Washington. The entire thing is Masonic from how they built Washington, D.C., which is not technically a part of the United States. I mean, if you study history,
Right.
how this goes down.
Exactly.
So now, so this is really cool, because remember, this goes back to creation, and this goes back to Adam and Eve, because when God made everything, it's a really exciting story, because God makes everything, and on the sixth day, he makes man. And on the sixth day, he gives everything he made to man. Man's supposed to name everything, give everything names and titles. And so God is a giving God. He loves his creation, and he gave everything to humanity. And we were to just, you know, multiply, right? And, you know, prosper and multiply. But then evil shows up, and he deceives. He's a deceiver, because what happened in the garden, it's a kind of crazy story, because God made man in whose image? His image. You know, there's just true things. And then evil shows up and says, what? If you've been deceived, and if you eat from this tree of knowledge, you'll become like God.
Right.
You understand the deception there? Because Adam and Eve already were like God. They were made in the image of, so he was this, and the garden was a deception. Satan, evil, comes onto the earth. And now for 6,000 years, we've got this battle going on. And evil is controlling everything. And so what's a godly kingdom? A kingdom of more than enough. Because if God made everything for man, the earth is, everything in it is for man. So there should be no lack, right? So
Right.
you go to any city, there should be no lack anywhere. Everyone should have more than enough. And so on the other side of it, in a satanic kingdom, well, you have the exact opposite. It's always exact opposites, right? And so you go to any city right now, you have people living in tents on the streets, and everything. It's horrific. Why? Because in the demonic kingdom, it's a kingdom of lack. And also, it's, you know, evil brings fear, right? So you said, you know, what's going on in the world? Fear, fear, and more fear, right? And what do? They want to bring on agendas of fear, because if you bring fear, then people are willing to give up their rights. They're willing to give, hey, don't worry, the government will take care of you. And that's kind of what's what we've been seeing. But who are the government? Well, you've done all the research on that and all your podcasts. Yeah. You literally talk about who these people are and what they've done with the money and all the connections. You do an incredible job of literally laying out the pyramid of money, and how every layer you go higher, that you get more powerful people and more powerful entities.
Yeah, I think it's important what you're talking about, because I also do a lot. Main thing I do is follow the money. But what I talk about when you're talking about lack, I always say that there's and what they've shown. I wonder your take on this as well. I feel like during the pandemic that they really overplayed their hands, and a lot was shown to the people that would never have been seen if that did not happen the way it did. And a lot of people did get out a lot of information, and they used their critical thinking, and they figured out a lot of things were off, which one of the biggest ones was the amount of money going to Ukraine. Because I don't think people understood that they have plenty of money. I talk a lot about the IMF, and refer a lot to John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, and the UN and their whole developing nations agenda, and these billions, trillions of dollars that have gone to many nations around the world, especially in South America, in the Middle East, in Africa, that never develop. And what we saw during COVID was they have plenty of money. We have the technology, we have the agriculture know-how, we have the energy, we have all of that, so that every piece of land on planet Earth, God's green Earth, should be green. There should be energy everywhere. There should be education and internet and clean water and clean air and all of that. And they've proven to us that they have the money. It's never been about not having money. If they don't have it, they'll create it. It's about creating lack. So when the IMF or USAID or any of these groups go into a nation that they claim to either after war be cleaning up, which is a big part of war, which is who wins the war? I say who rebuilds the nation wins the war. But also going into all these nations that they've called developing nations for, 75 years since the beginning of the UN at least, and you realize they never develop, and they easily could because God has provided everything. I say this a lot about the climate change, fiction, which is the Earth also was born with like we are, with an immune system that has been thwarted again by, I believe, the same people, and they go in and then the IMF makes loans to these nations that need to be rebuilt, including our own. The loans they know can never be paid back. Next thing you know it, when the loan isn't paid back, then the powers that be that I point out a lot when I do my presentations, they then seize that land and all the resources. They turn the people into either literal slaves or debt slaves. Next thing you know it, that place not only never develops, but it's stuck, and it's always lacking. And they put in some kind of puppet leader or take down or do an intervention and bring down a leader with regime change to keep lack continuing on and on and on, when we know very well that they have the ability through agriculture and technology and everything to have every place on planet Earth overflowing with all.
Now, Mel is talking about something very important. Satan has used powers that be, governments, puppet governments, UN, agendas, to create lack. Satan wants to create lack and fear. God wants to create prosperity and faith. But you have to see what is happening behind the agendas. What agenda is building faith and prosperity, and what agenda is creating fear and lack? So there's more than enough and to spare, but this lack has been created by evil and puppet masters and powerful people in high places. And this guy is also saying that in 2024 you're going to see a great change. Well, I sure hope so.
Energy, with food, with farming, with everything, even on the Sahara Desert, they have the technology and ability, and yet they are manipulating lack and poverty. And then they claim to be the ones that will solve lack and poverty. And it's just a cycle that goes over and over. And again, it's the same people for all these years that really at the top, like you said, are funding both sides of all of this, including that lack and desperation and poverty is a cycle that continues over and over by design.
Well, actually, that you brought up some beautiful points, and let's definitely hammer at this one because they always bring a solution. You said, see, that's beautiful. You actually nailed it. How this is all playing out, because see, when you create lack, then ultimately, what's it saying? You can't have any good. I forget the actual saying, but something relating to when there's a serious event happen, they take advantage of it, right? And so the point being is that they are causing all of these issues in the world, but this is all scriptural because ultimately they're planning on bringing on a one world government, and the one world government will be the solution to the lack. You see, right. So they constantly bring in the lack and the lack and that, and we'll explain that in just a second. But then the solution they will have. See, so it won't be a biblical solution because last time we were talking, you're asking about them stealing time and all this stuff. So I wanted to make another extra slide for you today. I wanted to kind of cover all this stuff. But so let me pull my slide deck up and I'll do a share screen here. And this will kind of give, because the visual is always, very much more helpful. So let's talk about how this all began. So we talked about Nimrod being the first Mason. Okay, so this is the guy building Babylon, or in this case, it's Tower of Babel, but no different than Babylon, Tower of Babel. And then just before it was completed, God shows up, destroys the tower. Okay, and then Nimrod flees to Iraq. When he gets to Iraq, he does what? He changes his name to Gilgamesh.
Right.
There's the G in your Freemasons. So you're basically seeing the Freemason. That's why I brought up Washington, D.C., because Washington, D.C., everything's on 33-degree angles because they're trying to rebuild Babylon. Okay. And then you go to the story. This is the prophecy of Daniel 2,500 years ago. So, the point, like when I go on stage, I'm saying everything we're seeing is not political, even though it might feel like it, right? It's
Right.
biblical because it's being superseded by the Bible. And the perfect example that I can give you is literally the story of Daniel. This is 2,500 years ago. The crazy part of this, it's perfect. We've seen Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, the papacy, United States. We've seen all of these things manifest. But if you study the story of Babel, just before it's completed, what happened? God shows up.
Right.
Okay. So we're at a moment in time where God's about to show up. It's going to freak people out, but it's going to actually destroy all of these plans. So it's a double-edged sword. You know that saying, it's the best of times and the worst of times. That's what we're stepping into. This is going to be the best time the world's ever seen. So I know it might look horrible, but when God shows up, it turns into the best time you've ever imagined. Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Think about this, right? They get thrown in the fire. Imagine the safest place they've all of their life that they've ever been was in the fire because an angel's with them. I believe it was Jesus. You know, well, Daniel gets thrown in the lion's den. The safest place that Daniel's ever been in his life was in the lion's den because he was protected by the angels. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
as much as all of this looks horrible, when God shows up, it's like the creation, which is evil, just a creation, meeting the creator. It's not even a battle. If there's no arm wrestling, it's just like you're done. So in a short window of time, boom, they're done, they're finished. So, you know, you read scriptures and it talks about, you know, the mortal wound, it talks about the fall of mystery Babylon, but this is about what's to happen. And then also it's interesting, you know, from what happened to the prophet Elijah. When you read First Kings, do you realize that this happened in the third year? So the glory of God came down on Mount Carmel in the third year. What year is this? The third year. What a coincidence, right? You study the story of Daniel, 2,500 years, all that's missing is the fall of Babylon. So, you know, could this really happen in our lifetime? The probability is actually quite huge that this could happen. And it's literally just using biblical calculations to figure this stuff out and how it could actually play out. And so you talk about how they did it all. They did it with the money. So let's talk about it because this is like a very important topic.
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't for the money, they couldn't do this. So let's look at the monies and how they did it. So United States founded under God. Eventually, you know, then there's this little secret meeting. They come up, you know, you can study the story of Creature from Jekyll Island, and it kind of expands more upon all of that. But, you know, those have done the research know this. But the interesting part is it's when Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, August 15th. Now, when you study scriptures, it talks about in Leviticus, it says, thou shalt consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land and to all of its inhabitants. So that's Leviticus. So if you study Leviticus and use that scripture, I find all these things fascinating because there are no coincidences. So 50 years from when Nixon took us off the gold standard to the exact day Kabul fell. Exact day. 9 days later, look at all the events that are happening. 9 days later, on the 24th of August, the Saudis, who we have a petrodollar contract with. So remember, 2 years later, after Nixon took us off the gold standard, 2 years later in the fall of 73, we approached the Saudis and say, hey, listen, we'll build out your nation as long as you sell the oil only, the word is only, in the US dollar.
Right.
And what happened, right? So that's been so forever. For 50 years now, we've had the petrodollar because of that agreement of 73. Well, you run 50 years from 73, and what a coincidence, we're right here, right now, 2023. So it's interesting when you look at all the biblical time windows. And so 73 ends up being rather interesting in terms of time because after Kabul fell 9 days later, Saudis signed a military agreement with Russia. So let me ask you, Melik, what would be your opinion on this, right? So if you're the Saudis and you have a military contract with the United States, why would you need a contract with Russia? You've got a military contract with a superpower, don't you? Like, see what I'm saying? It's superpower.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why would they have signed it why would the Saudis have signed a contract 9 days later with Russia? After Kabul
I
fell?
believe because the Saudis saw that they could no longer trust America because it was fully captured, and they watched what happened with them installing a globalist under the name of the Biden regime. And I think that they thought America has fallen and that they no longer trusted America. That is what my opinion is of what happened there with the Saudis and the Russians.
And you nailed it. Exactly right.
Oh,
That's exactly correct. Because why else would they do that? Because you don't need two superpower contracts, right? And then immediately after that, it was on the second of February 24th. Again, on the 24th, again, the war began with Ukraine. 30
yeah,
days later, on March 24th, Russia starts selling oil for rubles, which is like basically an act of war. You see,
right.
because you're not allowed to sell oil for anything but the U.S. dollar. So we're seeing all, and then on the 24th of June, another 24, you saw overturning of Roe v. Wade. So all of these things are happening. And then we go into just this past 2 months ago in August. So 2 years to the exact day that the petrodollars, think of this, 2 years to the exact day that Saudis signed a military contract with Russia, 2 years to the exact day they joined the BRICS on August 24th while we were in Vegas.
Wow.
And on
Now,
that exact
how does this connect to, a lot of people remember how Donald Trump was treated when he went to Saudi Arabia. They did the whole sword dance and I mean, this was all over the world for Trump. Everyone saw it in India and other places, but particularly in Saudi Arabia, it did seem that they were they saw the significance of Donald Trump as being something else. Do you think that they felt like that when they watched what happened in 2020 to America and also with Donald Trump, that was a sign to them or a time for them to say, that America had been captured? I mean, you don't know for sure, but it does seem from what you're saying that to them, just seeing how they treated Donald Trump, what they were doing with Donald Trump, they were also involved in the Abrahamic Accords. All of a sudden, the whole world, and a lot of them did comment on it, including Putin and Xi, of what happened in the 2020 election. None of them came right out and said what they saw, but all of them were all very much like, okay, something terrible just happened in America. Was that related to all of that, do you believe? Hey guys, thank you for watching the show. I just want to remind you yet again.
hard to know for sure, but you do know for a fact anywhere, any country Trump ever went, he was treated like royalty.
Right.
They knew he was someone special, and everybody would just, go out of their way to make sure that, things were done thus and so. So you got to admit, he's got that anointing that no matter where he is, whatever he touches, everybody knows he's someone special. Like when he walks in a room, it's like when a lion. I was talking to Pastor Alter Pawlowski, he went to it was what country he went to, but there's like lions, Africa, whatever it was, and he's
Right.
watching all the animal walking around, and then the lions get up and they move, and like everything stops.
Right.
Everything stops. The lions start walking. All the animals, it's just quiet. Everyone's watching what the lions are doing. And that's kind of like when Trump walks into a room and everybody just knows, like he just has this presence about him. So I'm just telling you, that doesn't happen unless you have some kind of anointing on you. There's some powerful stuff going on around him. And he's got, and there's all those prophetic words about Kim Clement that it's, basically talked about,
Right.
Trump will be a trumpet. You got to admit,
Yeah.
this is crazy stuff because he basically was saying this in 2007. And on top of that, he's literally saying that Trump's going to be watching a video with Clay Clark. No one knew who Mr. Clark was, and now we all know. So, and literally, this was just, a couple months ago. Clay is sitting there watching a video with Donald Trump about the Kim Clement prophecy of like 12 years ago. It says, they're holding a flag, and you're watching this video, and you're wondering if it's me, and yes, it's you. And so all of these things have been prophesied, and the only thing missing, literally, there's some incredible prophecies about Trump that Kim Clement had referenced, and virtually every one of them have the checklisted, like, yes, yes, yes. The only one still missing is the second term, right? And so that's going to happen because it's prophetic, but it's going to happen in God's timing, not in our timing. So we're like, oh, it's going to happen. He should be in there right now. You see, but the first thing that has to happen, see, when we talk about the fall of Babylon,
Right.
it's so important to understand. Babylon, the great is fallen. Okay, so we're going to talk about the fall of Babel. See, the fall of Babel, when God intervened, Babel fell. When God intervenes, Babylon, the worldwide syndicate, this is what JFK was talking about, the secret society, when it falls, okay, Trump is not in on the watch. He's not in because Trump, the anointed one, is not allowed to be there on the collapse of the United States. But the United States that you know is no longer the United States founded under God, particularly because it's fully bought, paid for, and captured, right? And now they turn it into a corporation, right? So that the United States is specifically a corporation. It's not the it's not the nation that we initially founded in 1776. So everything has changed so far, and now evil stepping in and try to grab humanity. They want to bring on a one world system, but before they allow it to do this, we're going to see a biblical intervention. God's going to intervene on this, and he's going to stop their plans. And their plans were because of the money. They took the money, they took us off the gold standard. And then the money supply, when you look at when I had the chart here earlier, the chart itself basically shows you just like a visual. This is only to the year. This is only to the year 2020. This screen here. But when you look at this red chart right here, see in 70, Nixon took us off the gold standard in 71 right here.
Right.
There wasn't $1 billion in circulation and supply. And then it went from billions to trillions to quadrillions. Now, I want you to understand that if you count to 1 million, it'll take you 12 days. If you count to 1 billion, it'll take you 31 years. But this is crazy. If you count to 1 trillion, which is 1,000 billion, almost 32,000 years to count to 1 trillion. And we're in the quadrillions now, which is 1,000 trillion. So the money supply is an absolute joke.
Right.
No one's paying anything back. They've used the money to enslave humanity, no different than what was happening at Pharaoh and Egypt and us in Israel. Israel was pinned up against the Red Sea there for 400 years. This is the crazy part. So for 400 years, Israel's enslaved to Pharaoh. And then Moses shows up, and then, God tells him to go talk to Pharaoh, let my people go. So this is literally the Mayflower lands 400 years ago when you got the year, because they landed in 1620, add 400 years, 2020, Corona comes on scene. You got to think this is like, what are the mathematical coincidences from the Mayflower landing to Egypt being in 400 years of bondage, and then everything changed at the 400-year mark. Moses shows up. So what happens? So then you read Daniel 12, verse 7. It will be for time times and a half a time. Well, let's go time times and a half a time. That's 3.5 years. So Corona comes on scene in January. Actually, it comes on Hanukkah, was the last day of Hanukkah, that actually the first case. And that was the last, that's why it's called C19, COVID-19, because it came in 2019. So that was the last day of Hanukkah. And then 30 days later, takes us to January. You run a 1,260-day cycle. It takes us to the summer solstice of this past year, which would be the 21st of June. On that day, you mentioned Trump. Trump was 77 years and 7 days old. Three Daniel cycles to the exact day. On that day, or actually the day following, so on the first day of summer, what happened was the text comes out that says, the Hunter Biden text that links Hunter to his father, that he now is involved in his business dealings, which he's been denying for 4 years. That happened. And I basically said on Anita's podcast that watch from the summer solstice to the winter solstice, 180 degrees. These people are finished by the time Christmas rolls along. I know all of this sounds crazy, but the timelines are pointing to all of this massive, massive change in the world. And so, when we look at biblical timelines, because that's the key, you got to look at biblical timelines and how this is all playing out. So I wanted to show you something, because you were talking about how evil is stealing time. And so I made this actual chart for you this morning before we got on. And so just to give you a visual of this, but when you go to the movies?
Yeah. Sure.
Remember the 20th century?
Uh-huh.
Why do they use that?
I don't know.
Let me explain. So this is give you understanding. So when you get understanding, like, oh, that makes sense. So nothing in the world is around that they would be picking this stuff, okay? But none of this is exactly what they've been doing. So you've got Jesus Christ himself was born, and so he was born on the Star of Bethlehem was September 11th on 2 BC, and then just 2 weeks later was September 29th, 2 BC. And this was the birth of Jesus, based on what's called the Revelation 12 sign. So when you go study scripture, there's a program called the Stellaria. It's a Stellarium software astronomy program. You can download it. We were talking about this. And so in 2017, Virgo gave birth. And again, I'm not talking numerology or astrology. I am talking scripture. Revelation 12 talks about Virgo giving birth. Well, we know Christ is not coming back as a child. He's coming back as a warrior. And I think you're going to appreciate this conversation in a second. So the first time this happened was on 2 BC on Rosh Hashanah. You see, what is Rosh Hashanah? It's the head of the year. It's the start of the year, right? Jesus was born on Rosh Hashanah, September 29th, 2 BC. Then you got to go to 0. So it's a 3 count. So it's -2, -1, 0, and then 1 starts. So then he died at year 30, but he was 33. I'm going to repeat that. He died at year 30, but he was 33. Because he was born on 2, -2, and you got it's -2, -1, 0, and then 1 starts.
Right.
So he was 33 years old, but at year 30. Why is that important? Well, very simple, because when you study scriptures, there's numerous scriptures that cover that Jesus, his length between his first coming and second coming is 2,000 years. There's a link here, but basically it talks about this, it's about 2,000 years. So we'll check this out. So from the so if Jesus was born on 3 BC, he died at year 30. If you add 2,000 years to year 30, guess what you get? Agenda 2030.
Can't make it up. Can't make it up. That is pretty
And
crazy. Yeah.
so the Star of Bethlehem appeared at 2 BC. Jesus was born on Rosh Hashanah. See, Satan knows he can calculate as well, probably better than I can, but he can't see into the future. Only God, that's why God wrote a prophecy 2,500 years old that stands to date, and no other psychic prophet or no other psychic or soothsayer can do this, because no one can see 2,500 years into the future unless by the hand of God. And so the point being is that, so you've got year 30, add 2,000 years, boom, there you go. That's why they use the 2000 century 21, century, 20th century Fox, because they're basically announcing the lights, the camera, the action for the return, for their bringing of the Antichrist, because they're going to steal time. Now, the other part to this I want you to understand, give you kind of visual on this, is Revelation 12 sign. And you're going to appreciate this. So a boy is born in the heavenlies, because it says Virgo gave birth to a boy child, September, which is Rosh Hashanah again, just a coincidence, born on Rosh Hashanah, September 23rd, 2017. Now, for a royal wedding, because this is called legal time. So there's a thing in Hebrew called a bar mitzvah, okay?
Right.
And so a bar mitzvah, a boy turns into a man at age 13. And so if you add 13 years to the year 2017, guess what year you get? Agenda 2030. You see, So both ways you calculate it, they are bringing on a satanic system. They're shooting for Agenda 2030. That's why they've been talking about this for forever, about Agenda 2030. So there's nothing wonderful about it. It's actually the start of a satanic system that's coming upon the earth, because again, God gave evil a window of time, but it's not. I'm going to repeat this. The window of time is not the year 2023 or 24. So their plans are about to come to a screeching halt. So let's go through why this is going to happen. There's a thing in Isaiah, the Hebrew, there's one of the greatest prophets, Isaiah, one of the greatest prophets that ever lived, right? And he talks about Isaiah 61, the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance. So we're never going to know the day, just like when Christ returns, no one's going to know the day or the hour. Can't argue that fact because it's written in scriptures. But it says the year of the Lord's favor. So let's calculate the year of the Lord's favor. So the origins of the Arab-Israel conflict began in 1913. Then you got 35 years later, what we've got is Israel declared its independence, in 1948. And then immediately a war breaks out because the Arabs, everybody freaks out. They declare themselves a state, and so what ends up happening is at the end of that war, Arabs refused to recognize Israel's independence.
Right.
This is really important because, you see, Israel may have declared its independence, but it really, until the world recognizes its independence, it's not technically born. So what God revealed to me, actually, the real birth of Israel was 19 years later. So what happened 19 years later was specifically the 6-Day War. So the 6-Day War, and now, so you know the story of the 6-Day War, you're supposed to rest on the 7th day. So what a coincidence that the war ended on the 6th day, right? Because there aren't any. So it ended on the sixth day. The seventh day was a rest. Now, also what's written in scriptures, when you look at timeline, and this is an Exodus, right? You're supposed to plow your fields for 6 years and rest on the what year? The seventh year. Okay, so let's do some math. Well, we go from the 6-day war. We're going to run a Leviticus cycle of 50 years. So 50 years from 1967 ends up being Revelation 12 sign, which we just talked about.
Oh.
Now we're supposed to plow the fields based on Exodus for 6 years. And then the seventh year is a year of rest, Shemitah, which means that 6 years from 2017 is now.
Wow. Wow.
What this scripture is telling us is that if God's going to intervene based on his calculations and his timelines that he's laid out in scripture of the Old Testament, is telling us that if this is based on the calculation I've shown you, everything's supposed to be at an end where God has intervened on our world before the end of this year. And I find it fascinating that on the exact day, this is cool because probably the most important day of the year is called Yom Kippur. And you know this to be a fact. It's a day of judgment. Yeah. Okay? So let's explain the difference between Rosh Hashanah, trumpets, and Day of Judgment, Yom Kippur. The difference is, sound the trumpet on Yom Kippur, which this year was September 25, and proclaim liberty throughout the land and all of its inhabitants. All nations are judged on Rosh Hashanah. So this is the head of the year. And then the final verdict is sealed on the Day of Judgment. Right? So not making this up. This is scriptural. Okay? So now what happened on the Day of Judgment? Remember Arnold Schwarzenegger? On the Day of Judgment, think about this. Of all the days that Trump could be holding a Glock in his hand, he's holding it on the Day of Judgment. I just find these things fascinating because none of these are by coincidence. And also the saying was, you know, we know Trump's going to have a second term based on Kim Clement prophecies. And what did Arnold say? I'll be back. So I just find it's kind of funny, but at the same time, too, it's crazy that he's literally holding a gun like Arnold was holding a gun and saying, I'll be back. So he steps out of the police station, then he comes back, guns blazing. And so I'm just saying that all of this is, you can't say these are coincidences because it's not possible. There's just too many coincidences. All this is playing out. So the year 2023, we've literally got 2.5 months left, right? We've got the end of, and today's the 19th, so into the end of October. And then that brings me to the Yom Kippur War, which is important to understand because the Yom Kippur War, I basically stated that the Yom Kippur War, there's a war, the chance could break out at the first week on the 6th or 7th of October. Well, we've seen that. So now let's study, since, you know, that which has been will be again. So let's kind of study scripture and let's all study history. And so the Yom Kippur War came to an end on October 26th. So is it about to replay October 26th, 27th? I don't know. I'm just telling you what history tells us because you like studying history as well. What happened was the ceasefire agreement was signed on the 11th of November. Wow. I'm just saying that there's a huge probability that this war is going to come to a sudden end sometime between now into the in the month of November. It's going to be historic how this is about to play out. I find it all fascinating because when you study scriptures, it comes down to the Leviticus is so critical. Thou shalt consecrate the 50th year. We know that 49 years ago, 7 times 7 is 49, Roe v. Wade was overturned last year. And now we're in the 50th year. Roe v. Wade became law in January of 73. This January completes the 50th year. We are in the 50th year based on Leviticus for Roe v. Wade. It says very clearly, if God is with us, be not be mocked or be not deceived. If God is with us, who can stand against us? The United States has a covenant with God. So what I want to finish kind of on here is just kind of, we talked about a lot of stuff today, but a point I want to bring up here is very interesting because all of these things happened in 73. So you had in 73, Roe v. Wade. In 73, the petrodollar contract. In 73, the Davos Manifesto, which is where basically they outlined their plans for the next 50 years in the Davos Manifesto, which they published in 73. All of this happened in 73. And then very interesting, we just had confirmation by the breakout of the war in Israel that we are in a Leviticus cycle.
Wow.
I'm going to repeat that. The War of 73 and the fact that a war broke out in October confirms the validity of the Leviticus cycle, which means that because we've overturned Roe v. Wade, God is with us. So God's about to destroy the financial system as you know it. The US dollar is going to lose its status as the world reserve currency. Why do you want gold and silver? Because God is going to intervene on the world. This is Leviticus cycle confirmed by the 6 years from the Revelation 12 sign, because next year is a year of rest. The World Economic Forum, these sickos that you do all the work on to expose them and everything that they've done, because they built it with the money. They built Babylon with the money. These people are unfortunately in a 50-year cycle. And remember, events are not political, they're biblical, which means who's in charge? God. The Father is in charge of all of this stuff. The prophetic word of Kim Clement is, they will bring this nation to its knees. And then you will hear the sound of great victory. The brothers of Goliath stand in glee, which are the BRICS nations, which now Saudis are a part of. We will cripple you. Who's you? The United States, big brother. So they're going to cripple the United States. We will lose our credit, okay? But then the prophecy says, but then you will hear the sound of great victory. So this is coming into a third seal moment, which is basically the greatest financial event in human history. You said earlier in the presentation that, we talked about, in Revelation, talks about the four horsemen, right? The four horsemen ultimately will be riding. So the first horseman was Corona. The second horseman was peace taken from the earth with the George Floyd riots. And that weekend, why would rioting erupt in Paris if we're talking George Floyd riots? You see what I'm saying? Because it was a worldwide phenomenon when a seal opens. And now the third seal is the great wealth transfer, which God is going to rip away the money that these people hoard. They hoard it and they enslave and control us. Then we're going to get the fourth seal. So by the time these four horses are riding in the future, that's when the Antichrist comes on scene. So that it starts in the year 2030, right? Based on what I've shown you, they're going to stay stealing time. They're going to come in as the false Messiah with solutions to all of the problems that the four horses created. So the chaos in the world is because the first horse is riding. Now you got war and rumors of wars, which is the second horseman. And now we're about to see the third one, which is basically economic collapse. Right. To repeat that. What's about to happen is economic collapse. So those who have listened to your podcast, you've done a great job of explaining the money system. Andrew comes on with you. We did a podcast the other day. We talked about why people should own precious metals. Why? Because what's coming is the greatest economic collapse in human history. The bond market will collapse next year. The US dollar is going to crash potentially this year. And into next year, the bonds collapse, the banks collapse. This is going to be a historic collapse of the financial system. Is it good or bad? See, it depends if you're that sounds horrible. It depends. It's a double-edged sword. Did you prepare for it? If you're prepared, it's going to be the greatest event you've ever imagined. It's going to be the great wealth transfer, the greatest transfer of wealth in human history. On the other end, it's going to be the horrific thing because people are going to do millions and billions. But again, people have been worshiping money, so God's going to rip that away from them, because what did Moses say to Pharaoh? Let my people go so they can go in the wilderness and worship me. Pharaoh was holding on to them. And so the Jubilee is a freedom from slavery. So it's a returning of the land, because Leviticus states that, again, back to Leviticus, thou shalt consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land. The land. Right. So it's a return of the land. So the United States has a covenant. The land of the United States has a covenant with God. That land is going to be restored by the hand of God, because at the Red Sea, it wasn't Moses's battle. It wasn't Israel's battle, because Pharaoh was so powerful. No matter what Israel did, he would have killed Israel. His plans were to kill everybody at the Red Sea and then use Moses as an example of don't come against Pharaoh, right? And if God didn't show up, there would be no nation of Israel today. You and I wouldn't be speaking today. You know what I'm saying? It's just this. But then when God showed up, everything changed. In 24 hours, Pharaoh was dead. His army was destroyed. The Red Sea was closed, and there was no one chasing Israel anymore. So, and that moment in time, it could be comparable to what happened at the Tower of Babel. And so I know all of the things in the world look, scary, horrific, but it's supposed to be. It's going to get worse yet because, the prophecy is that I will bring this nation to its knees. So they will bring this nation to its knees. So the United States as a nation, potentially someone's going to fall. I would suspect my goal charts are saying to be careful and look forward or pay very close attention to Halloween starting. So the 31st into about the 3rd of November, we could see something crazy going off. There's also the important time window of the 24th of October. Remember the 24 again? Yep. So, and my patterns are 1, 2, 4 for the stock issues and all the many world events, because it's 4,000 years of the Jews, 2,000 years of the Gentiles, 1,000-year millennial reign. So there's your 4, 2, 1 again. And so, so I would suspect things are going to really start to escalate about the 24th of this month of October. So 1, 2, 4, drop a 0. I would suspect things are going to have to escalate or start around the 24th of this month. They're going to accelerate into month end. And then we get into Thanksgiving. And so that's, Galatians, for be not deceived, for God is not mocked, for what a man soweth, thus shall he reap. I would say, so starting the 24th, give you some time points that we can watch. The 24th of October, I think, will be a very critical starting point. Potentially, we'll see. Again, I'm just giving you times. We'll have to see what happens. I'm saying really pay attention to also the Halloween into the first week of November. So potentially the 3rd or 4th of November. So that time window from the end of the month into the first week of November. Then things are going to start to change drastically. November is going to be crazy. The Kim Clement prophecy was hypnotic November. What does that mean? You see what I'm saying? What does that mean? But I do know that when I do my calculations on top of this, which I really find interesting, that when I run the calculations that calculated from the Trump election, right? You run 12. So I'll show you this right here because this is kind of crazy as well too. Just to kind of finish up here. And I thank you for the time to be able to go through all this.
No, I love it.
So when you look at the time windows, so we run from when Trump gets elected here, he gets elected on November 8th, 2016, 1,260 days. And this is your 421, April 21, so 421. Oil goes to negative $38 a barrel. So crazy, but basically 1,260 days from election, 421, oil goes to negative $38 a barrel, which doesn't make sense. How does the oil go negative, right? Then you run, and then Edenville Dam breaks 30 days later. 40 days later is the George Floyd riots. 1,260 days later is this November. All I'm saying is that this November into December 15th is an very, very interesting time point. Kim Clement called it hypnotic November. And he also said, because fall ends on the 21st of December, Kim Clement also said that in the fall, you will know who my David is. Second thing that I want to show is from when Pentecost, the George Floyd riots break out, 1,260 days is this November 11th. It's interesting, 11/11. That's the day that Israel signed a peace treaty 50 years later to the exact day. From Pentecost, when the George Floyd riots break out, exactly 1,260 days to the exact mark is this November. So I'm just saying you pay attention this November because we could have a November surprise where something crazy could happen. So I don't know, but I'm just saying that biblically we are in biblical times. And so anything can happen. And then we get into, again, Thanksgiving, which is the 23rd of November. So we got November 22nd, based on my calculations, is a very important starting point again, into the 24th, because of the 24, 1, 2, 4, double 1, 2, 4. And then right in the middle of that is Thanksgiving, the 23rd. And then the prophetic word is, be not deceived, for God is not mocked, for what a man soweth, thus shall he reap, which means it's harvest, right? So if God's going to, and then the prophetic word was also, because the harvest basically means when you plant an evil seed, you reap evil.
What you
plant a good seed. So if you plant evil, you're going to reap evil, but in harvest, you're going to reap it upon your own head. So you might plant evil for us, but you're going to reap that upon your own head. And I find that calculation interesting, and all the November calculations interesting, because the Kim Clement prophecy was in the fall. The Kim Clement prophecy was they will fall in fall.
Right. Yeah,
So
I've watched
all we
those.
can do is just,
Crazy.
we've seen the prophecies. I'm showing you the math calculations of
Right.
all of this is basically screaming to November is supposed to be epic into December for cryptocurrencies. I've got a massive explosion and for gold and silver before year end, and it's going to go historic. So those who have prepared with precious metals, with cryptocurrency, we talk about cryptocurrencies, why they're of benefit, because bottom line is when the financial system goes down, remember, they hate cryptocurrencies because why? It's very
Right.
simple, because they
Can't
want you to
control them.
use their money. They can't
Right.
control it, right? Because I
Yeah.
could click a button and send you whatever fraction of whatever I want in any monetary instrument in a fraction of a second, whereas they
Right.
can't. There's no middleman on that. So
Right.
cryptocurrencies, gold and silver, are basically anti-dollar. And that's the whole point of the presentation. How do they build all this control systems? With the dollar. They
Yeah.
love money. The root of all evil is the money.
Right now, you've also talked many times. We've talked about it in real life. Also, is that central bank digital currency is like what I think they look at as their get out of jail free card. Like, we're just going to switch to this. And we know it's collapsing, but we're not going to let it collapse. So we're going to convince everyone that it's more, because they do all this with language and making it as if it's convenient for us, or it's a solution. Our borders are open. I know that the next solution that they're going to present is digital global ID, so that everyone's traced, so they can track terrorists. I see what they're doing. So one big part of what you're talking about and is the opposite of what they're pitching it as, which is the central bank digital currency. They want to erase all of their criminality that they've perpetrated with their money system and bring us over under the guise of protecting us from corruption, from this and that and the other thing. It's really that they're trying to protect themselves in this whole system by tricking us into entering into that, as they like you to enter into it, as a solution for all these different things, including identity theft. I mean, you see them throwing it at you. Where does the central bank is it really that they are pitching that as a solution that is really the opposite of that? It is their only way out, is what I see.
I love that you brought this up, because I've had this conversation with other people and they don't really understand it as well as you do. So you did a beautiful job in explaining it. And I'll give kind of the next level conversation on this, is because, see, the central bank digital currency, what do we talk about? We talk about, if you wanted to count to 1 million, it would take you 12 days. If you want to count to 1 trillion, it would take you about 32,000 years. And now we're in the quadrillions, okay, which is 1,000 trillion. So here's the problem. You'd have to cut down every single tree on Earth to account for the money that's digital. So there's two kinds of money. There's digital money, which you have in your bank account, and there's physical money that you actually have as dollar bills. You can say, oh, they're the same units, but no, they're not, because digital money, there's not enough paper in the world or trees in the world to account for the digits that have been made. And that's why in this transfer, what's about to happen is those that hold physical paper are going to actually be using that paper to transact, because people are still going to need to transact because we're accustomed to using the paper. See,
Right.
but the reason for the central bank digital currency, because there's so much money that's been created, they have to just flip it into digital. And then you go to central bank digital currency. So it's kind of like, oh, it's just a moot point. We're just using this system now of money. And ultimately when the fourth horseman's riding, they're going to say that all paper money is tainted with the new virus. And so they're going to not want you to transact in this new money, in this old paper money system. Yes. So when the fourth horse rides, they're going to say all the money's tainted with the virus. And then that's going to bring on their ultimate central bank digital currency. But this is what I want the viewers to understand. The plan for the central bank digital currency is tied in with Babylon. So now let's think about this. If God intervenes on our world and the banking system that we know today is suddenly, abruptly comes to an end, has a major problem, and the angel of death that visited Pharaoh, these are things that we can talk about. The angel of death that visited Pharaoh is on the earth right now by 4 different prophets. He's going to strike. He didn't strike. He passed over Goshen. He passed over Israel. There's going to be thousands of deaths in a single day. So the bankers, politicians, all these people that have been involved in this are going to, suddenly be no more. The prophecy is the morgues will be filled. So God is going to intervene upon the world. I don't know the day this is going to happen, but it's soon. Is it Is it soon before year end? Is it early part of next? I'm just saying God's not going to be mocked, and things like are going to happen. So these bankers that are planning all of this agenda
Right.
are going to fail horribly, or they will be no more. So the central bank digital currency that they're planning right now will completely fail.
I
It's
agree.
not going to happen because the banks fail. They're the ones that are bringing it on. So as crazy as that might sound, the war that just started sounded crazy in September, but now we're in war with Israel's in war. The death of Ginsburg sounded, the overturning of Roe v. Wade sounded crazy, but then that happened. I'm just saying that all of these things sound crazy, but then when they happen, right? And so the central bank digital currency is going to fail because why? This is really cool. God's going to transfer the wealth. So he's going to use the wealth of the sinner as stored up for the righteous. So maybe you got JP Morgan, they got the largest stash of precious metals, particularly silver in the world. Okay. But then when you read Ecclesiastes, it says, the job of the sinner is to store up the wealth to be handed over to the church. So when Trump's back in office, he's going to use the laws of the system to rip all the precious metals away from the bankers. They're going to lose all of their wealth. And that's why finally when the beast system rises and it starts in 2030 forward and the Antichrist comes in years later, because remember, they haven't even built the third temple yet. So there's no third temple. And unfortunately, the Jewish nation was deceived by the Pharisees. Okay, the Pharisees, and these are from the synagogue of Satan, which is written in Revelation 2, verse 9, so they deceive them. And so from a Christian standpoint, you don't need the third temple because we are the third temple. From a Jewish perspective, Messiah hasn't arrived yet. So all the Jews of Israel are gung-ho on building that third temple because they're waiting for the return of Messiah. You see, and so the calculations are all saying that when the year 2030 comes along, everything starts. Now Antichrist doesn't come on scene in 20.
So, what's going to happen? Latter-day Saints know that after these two witnesses hold back the armies for 2.5 years, and Jerusalem is captured and largely destroyed. 2/3 of the population of Jerusalem and the armies are destroyed. These witnesses die and they dance around them for 3.5 days. Then life comes back in them. Christ takes care of the rest of the armies, and they see the palms of his hands, the wounds in his hands and his wrists, and ask him who he is, and he says he's the Messiah. And the Messiah, Jesus Christ, declares that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is his true church. The time of the Gentiles comes. These nations get rid of a lot of Latter Saint elders, and time that Israel opens up to preaching of the gospel. Many Jews come back to Jerusalem, and these Jews are converted. They build a real temple, a Latter-day Saint temple, a holy temple. This is going to be their third temple, their real third temple, not the false third temple. And this will usher in the time of the Jews, and the Gentiles will cease when these nations get rid of the elders and don't want them in. They are afraid of their powers and so forth. So much going on here. You gotta look at an LDS perspective too, as well as a Jewish perspective. These numbers, and next year I believe is going to be a hinge year. I believe that from the signs of heaven to the financial signs to Trump coming back. So it's important.
30, that's about 3.5 years later. But then we're going to see things start to manifest in 2030 that set the stage for this. And then when the Antichrist comes on scene, this is the cool part about the money supply. The Antichrist system will not have any gold and silver, because Proverbs 13:22, the wealth of the sinner is stored up, so the wealth of the evil ones is stored up for the church. So those that prepared are going to have trillions and trillions of dollars, and the other side, the evil ones are only going to have what? They're only going to have digital money.
Wow, cool. Now, as for you, how can people follow you and find you? I mean, I've watched you during the last 3 years that I've gotten to know you. And once and again, you blow my mind. And what people have to understand is that you have been right many times, and I have watched this happen. And it is something, it is some kind of, like you say, it's God, and it's you're putting together numbers, but you still have a fascinating way of doing everything, and I highly recommend people follow you. Now, where can they follow you, and how can they keep in touch with everything that you're doing?
My website is gold2020forecast.com, gold2020forecast.com. And then that's the beginning. And now I used that God 2 years ago told me start that as a number because that's the beginning of the end. That's when the horsemen started to ride. So it's kind of interesting how all this is playing out. We have years forward. There's nothing to fear in the world. There's nothing to fear because God's got a bigger plan. So we're going to see awesome things here really, really soon. My more recent interviews and videos I'll put on YouTube, which is just put my name in bold and then Polney on YouTube, and you'll be
Great.
able to see me on YouTube as well too. And then if you ever want to see in person, when we're on the tours with Clay Clark, that's
Yeah.
always a lot of fun. You and I, I'm sure, going to be together in
Yeah.
California here in Tulare in December, so that'll
Yes.
be fun as well too. But Mel, you've got an incredibly awesome platform. You're so well
Thank
versed
you.
on understanding in all the finances that go on in the world, and that's the essence of this, right? They use the
Right.
money to build Babylon. You have to understand they use this money to build Babylon. And what is Babylon? It's a control and enslavement system.
Yep.
That's what it is. And so you're watching it. And now they've actually exposed their plans in the past 3.5 years, right down to the
Yep.
central bank digital currency of how they want to further enslave you because they can with a click of a button, turn that on or off. So they can shut you off. And so that's the whole agenda, right? But why? If you own the ultimate money, gold and silver, you basically are voiding yourself of anything related to them. So that's why those that
Yeah.
prepare financially who hold precious metals, you'll never need to be a part of whatever rises in the future because you will have the ultimate money. And more importantly, the gold and silver are going to be so highly priced. It's mind-blowing what these prices are going to be because God will intervene, flip the tables, and the prices of these precious metals are going to be astronomical. So you'll never need the beast system ever, because scripturally it says we're to be in this world, but not of it. So don't hold on to things. This is a fleeting world.
Right.
We're ultimately waiting for return of Messiah. That's what we're waiting for. That's what you should be planning for. We're
Right.
living in
Wow.
biblical times. Come on, look what's
I
going
know,
on in
I
this
know. I
world.
say it all the time. I say it all the time, and it's
Thank you,
true.
Mel.
And Bo has taught me a lot. He's regularly putting out a lot of information. But really, we have talked. We are both also friends with Andrew Sorcini. You guys know you can go to Mel K Gold or the melkshow.com partners page and go down to Beverly Hills Precious Metals. He's been helping me. He has lots of great options for anything you want to do. But it is time. It's past time. We've been telling you for 3 years. But gold and silver are God's money and will remain always God's money, and that is where we want to be. We don't want to be in their beast system that they're trying to force upon us. So, Bo Polney, you are always fascinating, and I love seeing you in real life. And now we're going to have you on the show more often, which I'm very excited for. And thank you for giving some perspective here and making people not fear. Any last words? Because it is, you and I both know, these people, they have exposed themselves. They are dangerous right now because they are, when they lose this battle, their battle is over. And it's been centuries, actually, that it's been going on. So what is your advice to people out there that are feeling demoralized or kind of just living in fear? Because I know that you don't believe that that is real and that people shouldn't be living that way.
I'll give you scripture. Matthew 24. You will hear of wars. Sound familiar? Rumors of wars. Sound familiar? But see to it that you are not deceived or alarmed. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you're not deceived or alarmed. These are the beginnings of birth pains. So Babylon falls, God's kingdom is birthed. So this is not the rise of Antichrist. We're about to see the birth of God's kingdom. It's an incredible time that we get to live here and watch this. Right. Another math calculation from the time Trump marries Melania. Think about the craziness of this. He married Melania. We talked about the sevens, like how crazy this is. So 7,000 days to the exact day Mel, is Purim of March 23rd of 2024, which means that, this is the flipping of the scale. This is like the flipping
Right.
of the tables that happened at Purim. Was an awesome point in life
I
because
know.
all of evil wanted Haman want all of Israel dead. Sound familiar? They want to kill everybody.
Yeah.
So he want everybody dead. And in the single day, Haman's hanging on his own gallows. You see, so
Yep.
what I want to finish with is this. Haman built that gallows that he hung on. You see, they always build their own demise.
Yep.
I'm going to repeat that. They build their own demise. They walked into the Red Sea and then God closed it on them, but they thought that their God opened it. You see, so everything going on is they're walking into the greatest trap in human history ever. And we are here to watch this, and it's expected to go down soon. And I hope that so there's nothing to fear.
I'm going to close it here. We're into 1 hour, 10 minutes, and a little more. I'll listen to the rest of it, see if he's got anything else to say. Let's end this with Pete Olson. He's in Kalispell, and this company I think is out of California. They don't allow a Montana address, but we're going to continue this and see where this goes. Um, Talking about a basic gold and silver purchases. This is one of the the billing for your website and the maintenance on it is $31 a month. Um, and we're not going pro, we're going the basic one. But you've got a lot of options here. One of them is the gold here, and this anywhere from a gram to whatever, and 2 grams. I'm going to just do a 1 ounce silver here, and that's it, 531. You can do 90% silver too, and other things. A lot of different options. So here they show the subtotal is 371, but that's a little off because there must be another one purchased in here. So I got to go back here and look. The 531 is nailed. Built annually, we don't want to do that. We want to do monthly. So that's the difference right there. So we go down here and see where it's at. There we are. The 39 a month and the 531 for silver is 431. And proceed to check out. When we go to proceed to check out, they'll of course do the information here, your email, password, all that, first and last name. When you get down here, they will not do Montana. You have to do Wyoming. So I've got to talk to my brother Steve and go from there. But we're going to get into this this month. I got to get permission from my brother Steve to use his address, and I'll mail stuff to him, and then he can bring it up when he comes up. That's what I'm going to do. All right, we're going to end it here. And